Hi, this is Lippy. I'm a shamanic healer, and in today's video I am going to share with you what kind of stance you need to develop when you're dealing with a disordered person, a narcissist, a sociopath, a psychopath, or other cluster B types, versus the stance that you are currently taking. Now, we are mostly programmed to deal with bad behavior with love, understanding, and eventually forgiveness. Now, these are amazing virtues: being loving, being understanding, being forgiving are very positive and very beautiful aspects of human interaction. And with the right people, i.e. people who are relatively healthy, they usually work beautifully. But when you are dealing with cluster B types, with disordered types of people, these very virtuous principles of being understanding, of being loving, of being forgiving will backfire very badly on you, because these very things will be used against you. And the reason for that is because the cluster B types of disordered people have a certain way of thinking and certain attitudes which, when you use these principles with them to deal with their bad behavior, immediately put you in a one-down position. So before we go into the stance that you need to develop, I will tell you a little bit about the mindset of a cluster B disordered person. Now, there's an excellent book on this subject which has delved into this in far more detail than I can cover in a short video, and it is a book I strongly recommend if you are somebody who has a cluster B person in your life, or are being abused in a relationship. Maybe it's your spouse or a friend or a family member or even a boss. And this book is called Character Disorder by Dr. George Simon. Now, Dr. George Simon has spent many years working with the disordered, and he has a very different take on how we need to deal with these people. And partly this video is based on the work of Dr. George Simon, but it's also based on my personal experience and years of trying to figure out what will work and what does not work when you're dealing with these people. So coming back to what I was saying, when you have a disordered person that you need to deal with, please understand that their attitudes and their mindsets are very different from a relatively healthy person. And there are three aspects of their mindset and their attitude that I'm going to talk about right now, which may give you an inkling or an idea about why the conventional stance of being understanding and forgiving and loving may not work with these people. The first thing is that they have very egocentric thinking. So their thinking goes something like this: everything is about me. For example, say a narcissist mother who has a son in school, and the son has been doing really well. He's a star student and she's very proud of him. If tomorrow suddenly his grades start slipping, the first thing a narcissist mom would think was, oh no, I'm a bad parent, this is all about me, his grades are slipping and it reflects poorly on me. What are people going to think about me? I mean, I used to have this child who was a star student. She's not thinking about, why are his grades slipping? Is he unhappy about something? Is something going on with him? Maybe he's being bullied in school? No. For her, it's all about her. It's all about how this is going to impact her. It's all about, this is happening because maybe she hasn't trained him correctly, etc., etc. ad verbum ad nauseam. The second thing, the second aspect of their thinking, which differentiates them from a relatively healthy person, is that they see others in their lives as possessions. They see them as extensions of themselves. So they don't see their friend, their partner, their child, their subordinate, or whoever else that they're connected to, as a separate person with a free will and a mind of their own, and somebody with their own needs and wants and ideas. To them, everybody is an extension of themselves. So what works for me, what I think, and the way I view the world is the way everyone should view the world, and the way it works for me is the way it works for everybody. And again, you will see this as an example, again, say, coming back to the same narcissistic mom. When she sees that her son is suddenly getting bad grades in school, she's not thinking about what needs he may have to, maybe he's burning out, maybe he needs to take a rest, I don't know. This is just an example. She's not thinking about that. She's thinking about, well, this is an extension of me. And she's not even thinking about this is an extension of me. She's thinking about this is me. So her son is her. You see where I'm coming from. And therefore, it's she's looking at this child as literally an extension of herself. And in some severe cases where you have, the really, really disordered, they literally see others as objects. They don't even see them as human beings. They dehumanize everyone. The third way or attitude or way of thinking which is common with disordered people, is that they have to win at any cost. So everything is a combat. The world is a stage set for war, and they are they have to be the winner in this war, in this game, the way they look at it. So they are either very overtly or very covertly, or sometimes both, combative, which means that when you try to handle them, or when you take the stance of being understanding and loving and eventually forgiving their bad behavior, immediately in their head you're in a one down position, because they're looking at it as, oh, okay, this is a weakness. This person is weak. How can I exploit that? Because I have to win. I have to win over. I have to. It's all about power over, not about power with. So, what we're going to discuss in the next few minutes is what can you do instead. So if understanding and love and if forgiveness doesn't go down too well with these types, what's the other option? So the first thing we need to understand is, what is the stance that most of us take? And this is not a video to blame or shame you for taking a more understanding or loving stance. It is just about making you see how those conventional, and sometimes now in this case dangerous, cliches about how to deal with people like this are not only not going to work, they are most likely going to escalate the abuse that you are receiving from this person. The first, number one stance that we're going to discuss is being understanding versus seeing the true colors of the cluster B disordered person in your life. Now, where did this idea come from of being understanding of people when they're behaving badly? There are many places where this idea came from, and one of the places that I would look at, the first and foremost, because it is the one place that affects most people's lives on a regular basis, and that is religion and spirituality. Because Well, of course, everyone has their own beliefs, but predominantly, religion and spirituality play a very big role in most of our lives, either directly or indirectly. And there is a common belief in the religious and spiritual circles which goes something like this. It's the idea that people are basically good. And if someone has strayed from their goodness, it's seen as that they've strayed from the goodness. Most religions and spirituality don't have or don't account for the fact that all human beings are not the same, and they are not essentially. So you have, of course, there are exceptions to what I'm saying. You do have people who become evil, if I may use that word, because they have been abused. You do have cases like that. You do have people who are not necessarily evil but also behave badly. So there are permutations and combinations. I'm not trying to paint a homogeneous picture of humanity here, but mostly religious and spiritual practice doesn't account for the fact that there is a subset of people who, for no better word, are just evil. There's no other word that I can use here. I want to use here, because I have seen this with 46 years of experience dealing with narcissists and sociopaths. And just trust me when I say this, not all of them, because sometimes there are narcissists who are not even necessarily evil, they are more misguided. So you have that variety as well. It's a spectrum disorder. Or you have more of the borderline types who are not necessarily evil, but they're out of control. They're out of control emotionally, so their behavior reflects that. But along the spectrum, as you go higher on the spectrum, you will see that there is something called pure evil, and we have to acknowledge the fact that it does exist. Not to acknowledge that it exists in a way that to make you pessimistic or to start doubting all humans, or looking at life in this very negative manner. Not in that way, but just to acknowledge that there are some people who are this way. And when you are coming from a space of understanding, you totally discount that subset of people, and it can cause you to distort reality. So it's like a kind of a gaslighting, or spiritual gaslighting, as it were, that causes you to stop really looking at the person in front of you and saying, wait a minute, who is this person that I'm dealing with here? Because you have this thing that's this veil which is saying, well, all people are basically good. So even if this person is really badly behaved, maybe they were very badly abused. Maybe they were hurt as a child, so they're behaving badly. They're acting out. Well, if you read Dr. Simon's book, you will see that the disordered characters, he differentiates between personality and character disorders, and he says the disordered character is not necessarily acting out, and that is they will often use, if they have been abused, they will often use that purposely to get away with their behavior. And I'd also like you to think about the fact that there are a lot of people who abuse and who don't become abusive because they're thinking, hey, this happened to me, I wouldn't want to do that to someone else. Yes? Now, that doesn't go to say that you don't have cases where bad behavior is caused by severe trauma. So predominantly, research shows that bad behavior, or any behavior, is caused by your thinking and your attitude. But yes, I mean, if you suffer from complex trauma, like I have complex PTSD, and I know that people who have complex PTSD are prone to compulsions. That is, in their case, they may have certain outbursts, say for example, outburst of rage or anger, or certain other types of negative behavior, which is not coming, they're not able to control it. It's not coming from their mindset, it's coming from a deeply traumatized space. So it's important to differentiate between that and you know, a person who's behaving badly, not because their trauma is causing them to, but because they simply believe that they are superior to you and they're entitled to you, and it's okay to treat you like shit, basically. Now, the other thing to remember is that when you are coming from a space of understanding, you will also become very easy to gaslight, because one of the characteristics of cluster B personality types or character disordered people is they are engaged in a game of impression management and manipulation. So they will purposely, to manage that impression with you, make you feel that they're behaving badly because they had a rough time in their childhood, or life has been awful to them. But it's not the truth. It's impression management. They're trying to manage their impression, your impression of them, or they're trying to manipulate you to get away with nasty behavior. Now, how do you differentiate? How do you know? Is someone behaving badly because they're traumatized, or is this really, am I dealing with a very dangerous, disordered person? Well, it's going to take you time to gain that knowledge, because I suggested there are these amazing books. Other than Dr. George Simon, there's two other amazing books that I would strongly recommend if you want to understand true human nature. And that is one book that I strongly recommend is this book by Dr. I think it's Dr. Lundy Bancroft. And it's a book called Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry Controlling Men. And although the book is primarily for women who are being abused by male partners, it's applicable to men who are being abused by female partners, or so predominantly my videos are aimed at women, but the opposite can be true as well, because there are abusive women out there as well. And another lovely book is to read a couple of books by Patricia Evans. So she's a communication expert who's written some groundbreaking books on controlling behavior and verbal abuse, and she also in her book explains, just like Dr. Simon and Lundy Bancroft, the difference between someone behaving badly because they're traumatized and someone behaving badly purposely and trying to cover it up because they're actually a cluster B or a disordered personality type. So it's going to take you a little bit of time. The biggest friend you have when you're trying to figure this out is your intuition, because you may have this conditioning in your head about, all people are lovely and eventually everyone is a lovely person or a beautiful person. They've just gone through a hard time and so they've hardened up. But usually you'll notice that your gut is telling you something else. Your gut is saying like, nah, that person isn't this amazing, lovely person that you think. A lot of the time when people are badly brainwashed or they're being badly abused and gaslit, they don't listen to their gut. So do your research, but listen to your gut, because your gut has been telling you from day one that this person isn't what they claim to be. The second thing, and this is very important, is the second stance that we take versus the stance that we should take, is being passive versus being confrontational. Now, this is coming from an idea, again, primarily the propaganda that is created by religion and spirituality, and to some extent pop psychology as well, about how force is bad and anger is bad, and everything is, so there's very poor discernment between using force and aggressiveness even for injustice. against injustice or for good. You know, the positive aspects of aggression and anger and force are totally overlooked, and you know, everything is clubbed into force is bad, anger is bad, this is destructive. Well, in some cases it is, yes. If I pick up a club and I get out there and smash my ex-boyfriend's car because he left me, well, no, you know, obviously I'm not propagating that kind of behavior. I'm not propagating violent behavior. I'm not talking about going out and pulling a gun on somebody. No, those are extremes. I am talking about the fact that when you're dealing with a cluster B type, and if you decide to take the passive route, oh, they're gonna eat you for lunch. They are going to eat you for lunch. Because one thing, and Dr. Simon says this in his book, the one thing you have to understand with them is the only way to get them to change their behavior towards you, or if not change their behavior towards you, at least be a little more wary of behaving badly with you, is asserting authority and control. Now, I know a lot of you would be very reluctant to do that, because especially if you're in a relationship with someone, because you're thinking like, yeah, I don't want to assert authority and control over this person. He's my friend, or he's my boyfriend, or he's my sister, my brother, or whatever. You know? But please understand that being passive with these types will backfire on you, because it will be taken as a sign of weakness. And what you actually need to do is you need to confront the behavior of these people as and when the behavior is displayed. Now, I'm going to make an exception here. Please listen to this very carefully, because I know some of you who are watching this may be in a violent situation. This does not apply if your abuser or the cluster B person you're around is violent and dangerous. Please do not go out and directly confront a person you know to be violent and dangerous. There is a whole other video for how to deal with someone, a cluster B, who is violent and dangerous. So please don't use this strategy there. It's just too risky, because you will get attacked. And if you ever do have to confront someone who's violent and dangerous, I would say take help, get help. You know, either a group of people need to come with you who can handle the situation, or you need to call the police or a domestic violence center to help you out with this. So this does not apply. But if you're around a cluster B who is not physically violent and dangerous, you need to call them out on their behavior. You need to confront their behavior as and when it arises. You don't have to yell, you don't have to scream, you don't have to get violent with them or throw your favorite vase at them. That's not confrontation. Yeah? Confrontation doesn't have to be belligerent and violent, but it can even be done in a very assertive manner. But it needs to be done, because they will not respond very well to your passiveness. They will just use it to walk all over you. The third important stance to remember is rushing to forgive versus operating from righteous anger. Oh, this is my favorite one, because I have to be honest, I'm so angry with this whole new age community and this whole new age movement, because I know, and this has happened to many other victims of abuse as well, I ended up tolerating so much abuse in my life and lost so many years of my life listening to this spiritual idea that the only way to heal is through forgiveness. Is the only way I was going to heal is through forgiveness, and to forgive my abusers. I have nothing else to say about this, other than I'm going to be very, very blunt. This is just a load of bull crap. It is a load of bull crap told to you to brainwash you to stay passive. And most of the people who propagated this bull crap are, sorry to say this, are cluster Bs themselves usually, because this is a great way to get you to just let them off the hook. Now, I'm not saying that forgiveness doesn't have a place. Forgiveness is a wonderful, freeing concept when you apply it, and when it comes organically and naturally. But when you are being abused, you're not going to feel very forgiving. And one of the problems with this whole new age spiritual, and many religions do this as well, and even it's there even in part of pop psychology, where you may even have therapists telling you to do this, is when you are being asked, when you are angry, and this is righteous anger, because this anger is coming from your body and your mind telling you, hey, you know what, this is injustice, you're being abused. And you need that righteous anger, the fuel that it gives you to move away from this situation and this person, or to challenge the situation. But instead you're being told to forgive. That is like saying, you know, you should wear no clothes just because it's beautiful and natural to be naked, even when it's like 45 degrees outside and it's boiling hot, and you go out there and you're probably going to get the worst sunburn of your life. It's not relevant to that situation, and it's not the right time. There is a time for forgiveness. First of all, you do not need to have forgiveness to heal. What I realize about forgiveness is it's like the icing on the cake. So you still have your cake, you can still have your cake. Yeah? The forgiveness would be the icing, and it will arise within you organically and naturally when you go through a healing process that includes resolving the anger. And how does anger get resolved? Through action. Anger is there, righteous anger. That is anger that points out injustice, to tell you, to show you what needs to change in your life. It is a great tool for transformation if you use it that way. Again, I'm being very clear here. I'm not talking about using your anger in destructive ways. Of course, I'm not promoting that. But please don't get into this idea that, I right now I'm dealing with a client, and she is being badly abused by a family member. And the other day she wrote to me and she said, I want to know, like, how do I move on, and how do I forgive this person? And the first thing I said to her, and I was like, why are you rushing to forgive? What do you think is going to happen? You're still living with that family member, and she's going to continue with her abuse. And the more you forgive her, the more she's going to escalate the abuse, because, as I said earlier in this video, you being forgiving is taken as a weakness. You say, oh, well, I can do whatever I want with this person. So what the stance you need to take is, if you have that anger, so don't produce anger if it isn't there. But mostly if you're being abused, you will have lots of anger, trust me. You may not be in touch with it, but it's there. You need to listen to that anger, to use it to transform the situation, to use it to confront in a healthy way where and when appropriate. Not to suppress it and put fake forgiveness. And I see a lot of people do this. They put fake forgiveness, and 6 years later they'll be sitting with me in a session going, I thought I had forgiven my dad, but he did XYZ, and now I want to kill him. What happened to all that forgiveness? And I'm like, well, honey, you never forgave because you fake forgave. You sat down and decided there was some spiritual or religious dictate that forgiveness was a great idea. And we can fool ourselves. Our brains are really powerful. We can make a decision in our brain that I will be forgiving. And the only way you can actually enact that in a fake way is by you're faking it. It's not a deep forgiveness that arises when you have transformed your life, when you have moved away from the abuse, and finally you're in a space where you're safe, and the forgiveness will arise out of that. The fourth stance is being hopeful versus being real. So many people who are in relationships with the disordered have this idea that this is going to change, that this person is going to change. And if only I become more understanding, if only we go to the next best therapist, if only this, if only that, if only blah, 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 blah. Now, what is the truth here? Can a disordered person change? Well, there are experts that say yes, and there are experts that say no. So there are some who say, you know what, the best way to handle a cluster B is to go no contact, is just cut them out of your life completely, because they're not going to change. But I know that that is not an option for some people. I know that, and of course that would be the best option if you can do it. That is the gold standard of options if you can exercise it. But if you can't, then there are experts who say yes, these people can change, but then they have to be dealt with a certain way, and that certain way is understanding who you're dealing with, understanding their true nature, not fluffing over it, not putting a veil over your eyes that social conditioning, religion, psychology has trained you to believe, but looking at the fact that there is a subset of people, of humans, who are capable of evil, and then working with that knowledge to help yourselves and maybe them in some kind of way to correct their behavior. But please understand that it would, even if that change were to happen, so Dr. George Simon believes that change is possible, but with a very specific treatment and a very specific methodology, which could take years and years and years. And you then need to sit down and be very honest with yourself, because when you're with a disordered person, they're usually very dishonest people, and they make dishonest people out of you as well, because you tend to start lying to yourself and you tend to start overriding your needs. You need to sit down and you need to say, okay, let's say this person could change. What will it take? And how long will it take? And am I okay with that? Am I okay with that? And if you decide to go that route, if you decide to stay with the person and work with them to change, also you need to be very clear that you should be shown evidence of that change. And Dr. Simon says in his book that if change happens, it happens in the moment. So let's say they're behaving badly, and as he recommends, you confront that behavior. You confront means you talk about the elephant in the room. You don't brush it up. You don't say, oh, this person's having a bad day, that's why they're yelling at me. You turn around and you say to the person, you need to stop yelling. You're yelling. You need to stop yelling at me. I will not tolerate you yelling at me. The change needs to happen. Them stopping yelling at you and apologizing needs to happen in the moment. If it doesn't happen in the moment, you can see that they haven't made much progress. So if you are going to go down that route, you need to see evidence that change is actually occurring. And I still think that the better way is to go no contact. But it's not always as simple as that, and you may make different choices. But keep in mind that be honest, be very, very honest, be real. So when I say the stance of being hopeful versus being real, is it's nice to have hope when you're dealing with relatively healthy people, because they're worth having a hope for. But when you're dealing with the cluster B types, be real, don't be hopeful, be real. It will work better in your favor. The fifth stance that you need to take is the stance of being equal versus deliberately positioning yourself. Now, again, this is an idea that's propagated by spirituality, religion, higher thought, and to some extent pop psychology as well. And the idea that we are all one, we are all equal, oneness, and yes, on a level of higher consciousness, we are all one. I'm not arguing that. But on the level of mundane day-to-day existence, we need to differentiate between us and others. Those are healthy boundaries where you need to know where I begin and where someone else ends. And you may be a person who's very egalitarian in your mind, like you want to have equality in your relationships. But the cluster B person, and remember we talked about this earlier in the video, there is no concept of equality in their head. It just simply doesn't exist. They think they're better than everybody else. They think they're superior to everybody else. So if Patricia Evans, in her book on verbal abuse, she's actually written 2 whole chapters about reality 1 and reality 2. The reality that the abuser lives in and the reality that you live in are 2 totally different realities. Because in your reality, we are all one, we are all equal, and you're trying to treat this person as if they're equal. But in their reality, you are a nothing. You're a subordinate. You are to be controlled and crushed if necessary. You're like this annoying little insect that they will do this with if they have to. So if you're going to try to be equal with them, like I said, they're going to eat you for breakfast. And remember, you never were equal in their eyes. You never were. Because in their eyes, they are all about, like I said, they are all about, they want to win. They want to have power over you. So the relationship was never equal in the first place. Remember, there is no such thing as an equal relationship with a disordered person. It is a very skewed relationship with most of the power resting in their hands. They will wrestle away that power from you. So as Dr. Simon says in his book, is you need to place yourself in a position of authority and power when dealing with them. This is very important. And there was an example he gave in the book, which is a beautiful example. He said, they are like these trains. Yeah? If you want to stop the train, you have to get hold of it before it gathers momentum, which means you have to decide very clearly when you're going into any kind of dealing with these people. You have to be very, very clear about asserting yourself and asserting your authority before you enter that arena, because they see it as an arena. Don't forget, you may not see it that way, but in their head, because they're highly combative, you need to go in very well prepared, because they will run over you. Otherwise you will get run over. And finally, the stance that we need to take, the last stance, is being open and vulnerable versus being strongly boundaried. Now, I'm a very free-spirited person, and my favorite way to be is to be open and to be vulnerable, to live from my heart. It's my favorite way to be. And I'm not propagating being any other way, really. To me, that's the best way to live, because it's the most connected way to live, in my opinion. But if you are going to be open and vulnerable around these highly toxic cluster B people, it basically is like you walking into a gas chamber with no gas mask. That's what it is. Okay? So what you need to do with them is to get very, very strongly boundaried. Now, setting boundaries is very difficult if you're traumatized, especially if you have childhood trauma, because childhood trauma can destroy your boundaries, and in some cases not destroy, but your boundaries never develop. And I have a beautiful video that explains why boundaries don't work, and I'm going to be making more videos about setting boundaries and how to set boundaries that do really work. But for now, just remember this: be open and vulnerable with your healthy friends. And that's another thing, when one of the things you need to do, be open and vulnerable with your healthy friends. And that's another thing, one of the things you need to do is to be able to deal with this disordered person, is to get support by having as many healthy people as you can in your life, because that will give you the strength to deal with the unhealthy person. And remember that don't go into their space in this open, vulnerable energy, because again, you will get eaten for breakfast. I do hope this video has been very helpful to you. I am going to, there are 2 YouTubers who have amazing videos that back up a little bit what I'm saying, and I'm also going to copy paste that in the comment section below, along with the books that I have mentioned. And I hope these will be amazing references for you to read and to get a broader picture, as it were, of what I am saying. I hope some or all of this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, and bye-bye.